Well, we have Ben Baby now, so let's ask Ben Baby.
Let's talk to Ben Baby.
Ben, do you think, before we talk about some Bengals and some offseason moves, should I heckle a wedding party because I'm rooting for the other team tomorrow night if the Cavs do win? Or should I just play it cool and let them enjoy their special night?
Yeah, I want to see how the night goes because, wedding parties can be very unique. There can be a lot of stressors going on. If things are going well, everybody's in a good mood, maybe you needle them a little bit. But if things may not be going as well as one might have hoped over the course of the evening, I would maybe be a little skeptical of rubbing it in.
I think you should wear a Cavs shirt and pull it out during the chicken dance.
Yeah, I don't know. The more I think about it, it's like, it's their special day. To be trying to embarrass them on their special day is kind of classy.
I may let them make the first move. If they throw the first jab, just like Ben is the professional career 1-0 boxer knows, if someone throws the first jab, you got to hit back. So
all right.
Maybe I don't throw the first punch.
Well, but if the Magic win, what are you going to say back?
I'll shut up.
Well, see, McNuggets,
I'll drink more.
I was never one of those people that believed in that. I don't believe in letting people throw the first jab.
No.
See, it might be a one and done.
You
thing.
catch a sucker punch, you're out.
I was always trained and taught. You swing first and you swing hard.
Ben,
so if you're going to do it, McNuggets,
what's the big
do it.
Does Ben swing first?
What's the big sports cliche?
Yeah.
Throw the first punch.
Right. Ben,
Listen,
you swing
Ben's
first.
a professional or amateur
I
boxer.
do not swing first, but I take a good awareness of the situation. I think I can counter with the best of them. My reflexes ain't what they used to be, but most people, we've had this discussion in the Bengals locker room over the last couple weeks with some guys. I don't think a lot of people are very good at throwing punches. Even some UFC guys, they throw some horrendous hooks. There's a really good video of Ryan Garcia showing Colby Covington how to properly throw a left hook, which is true. So my philosophy is you should be able to counter the first punch, but always the number one rule is protect yourself at all times. So however you feel best to protect yourself, go ahead and follow in that situation.
So who would win if we had like a boxing, Royal Rumble type of situation between all the Bengals beat reporters? We got you, we got James Rapine, we got Paul Dehner? Is that how you say his last name? I can't think. The Bengals don't have as big a beat as the Browns for some reason, even though it's a similar sized city. Who's winning? Who's winning? Are you taking them all out? Is there any competition? What do you got?
Well, I know for certain, the only thing I can say with 100% certainty is James Rapine is definitely going down. That's the only thing I know in this conversation. It could be a race. It could be a fight. It could be a pickup game. You put us on the field. Whatever it may be, I am getting the best of James. That is the only thing I know for certain. You can run and tell him that. He knows what the situation is. He knows that he can't hang. So, it is what it is.
All right, very good. Now let's talk some football. And the Bengals now have 3 offensive tackles that are really the size of sumo wrestlers because they added this kid Mims from Georgia, who's just massive. There seems to be a lot of varying opinions on him. Seems like the upside is this guy might be the next great offensive lineman, and the downside is he can't stay healthy. He hasn't played, and he's a bust. And let's face it, the Bengals' track record, they've done a lot of good things in the draft in recent years. But drafting offensive linemen, they have been a complete failure. Every offensive lineman they drafted in recent years pretty much has stunk, especially the ones they've drafted high. I can't believe Jonah Williams got paid what he does. He can't play at all. That was crazy to me. But anyway, are you buying into Mims? How good do you think he's going to be?
Well, we just unpacked a lot of stuff here. I think that you are correct in that the offensive line has been a problem spot for them. I think you got to go back several years to find a guy that they found giving a second contract. And, when you see Mims, when you talk to them, they felt like had he played more games, he wouldn't have been able to go to fall to the Bengals at 18. They really like what he put on tape. The health issues are going to be a concern. But the thing is they're going to be able to ease him in, give him a year to kind of get acclimated with Trent Brown. Now, that's assuming Trent Brown stays healthy, which is something he hasn't really done a whole lot of in recent years as well. And my thing is, and you bring up Jonah Williams, you bring up offensive line. I have a theory on this, and I've talked to a lot of the guys on that offensive line about this over the years, including Jonah. You go back and you go break down. Jonah gave up a sack against the Steelers, maybe it was a year or 2 years ago, in which Alex Highsmith beat him on a spin move. And I asked him about that, and he goes, what's weird is that a spin move is never a primary or secondary move for a edge rusher. It's usually a tertiary or even further down the list when you're talking about spin moves. And the Bengals, they're in so many pass sets that it's really hard for an offensive lineman to play well. And, we talk about the fight game a little bit every time I come on. And something that I've always thought, and is especially true in boxing, is that it's really hard to be good in hand-to-hand combat when you're always going off the back foot. And in boxing, that is definitely true. And when you're in pass blocking sets, you're always moving backwards. And you're always in offensive and defensive linemen generally know the Bengals, given the percentages, given what they like to do offensively, that you are pretty safe going into a pass rushing set 90% of the time or whatever it may be, even in neutral down situations. So I think there's a lot of factors to be taken into consideration there. That being said, you see the measurables with Mims, what Orlando Brown, what Trent Brown, even you look at Mekhi Becton, who they brought in on a visit, ultimately did not pan out for them to sign him, which is why they went to Trent Brown. All of them are really big dudes, and they're banking on the measurables at tackle being good enough and being the recipe for success given what they want to do offensively.
Ben, right now, your team is dealing with, two players that's disgruntled in Tee Higgins and Trey Hendrickson. How does those situations get resolved, or do they even get resolved in these two parties?
First off, the only team I claim, it's Arsenal, and we're fighting for the EPL championship right now with Man City. So that has been keeping me at bay over these last couple months. But as for these Bengals, you are correct. They are dealing with a couple contract situations with Tee Higgins and with Trey Hendrickson. And the Hendrickson one is definitely a bit more surprising given the fact that he just got an extension last year. They added a year onto his deal, some security there for him going into 2023. And he played at a all-pro level, in my opinion. You go put the numbers up with him, TJ Watt, Myles Garrett. Trey's metrics are just as good as those guys. You go across the board. I think he's definitely one of the premier edge rushers in the league. The issue is, when you go in, the Bengals, are they going to be willing to pay somebody at that level given all these contracts that are going to come up, specifically the two guys in Tee Higgins and Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow. We saw that Burrow already got his deal. Jamar, he's in this weird space with all these other top-tier receivers who aren't getting paid, like CeeDee Lamb, like Justin Jefferson. We saw Brandon Ayuk now potentially on the trading block going into this offseason now that the 49ers ended up getting a first-round wide receiver in Ricky Pearsall. So there's a lot of interesting factors in that receiver market, and Higgins is in that same boat. He's a guy that wants to get paid wide receiver one money. He's currently a wide receiver two. In him talking at his youth camp a couple of weeks ago, we tried to front and say, we don't know what's going to happen in terms of him showing up, but then he softened his stance and says, I expect to be here in 24. I think he understands the situation. I would be shocked if anything happens with Hendrickson as well, given how much leverage the Bengals have in their hand. And so, these guys, I understand the frustration. I think everybody can sympathize with them to a degree. But if you're the Bengals right now, you've got two guys on value deals. I can't see the Bengals wanting to give up that bargain that they currently have with Trey and with T.
Given what this team's already paid for Burrow, when the time comes, are they going to fork it out for Jamar Chase? Because, frankly, I have a hard time believing they're going to pay a receiver $35 million a year.
Yeah, when you look at how much you've invested in Jamar and kind of that chemistry that's there with him, that makes a ton of sense for them to do. He's a guy that they drafted early. I remember back in 2021, there were a lot of conversations about whether they should take him or Penei Sewell. Both of those picks have worked out for their respective teams. But you can tell when Jamar is healthy, when him and Joe are on the field at the same time, that there's an explosiveness to that offense that chemistry is something that you can't really put a price on. And as good as Jamar has been, I think they're going to try to move him around a little bit more, try to find more ways to get him the ball. They've done that over the last couple of years. You're talking about an elite receiver. And I did not really think that Jamar was going to make that big of an impact. I kind of underestimated how big he was going to be for this Bengals offense. And in 2021, we saw what he was able to do and how much defenses really changed their structure in order to keep that big play potential from not being there. And I think when you talk about paying Jamar, that's another aspect of it as well, is that if he's on the field, you have defenses that are going to shade to him. They're going to adjust the back end structure in order to keep him from being explosive. That's going to lead other receivers into more favorable situations. And if you have Burrow and his processing being his superpower, that's something that he should be able to take advantage of. So even if the numbers aren't there, the fact that you have a guy who can manipulate that space defensively, that is something that is incredibly valuable as well. And to kind of take that into a defensive perspective, I think that's something that got underestimated when the Bengals let Jesse Bates go, in that how well he played that single high look, how much range and how much space he took at the top of Lou Anarumo's defense. He allowed Lou to really do a lot of unique things underneath with the other 10 players and really open guys up to play freely. We saw how much that impacted them defensively last year. So I think that, while you are correct, that is a lot of money to pay a receiver. I think when you talk about guys who can create separation, win in one-on-one matchups, win against press, have the speed, have the yak capability, there are very few guys, if any, who can do it as well as Jamar.
So then what else are they going to sell to pay him? If they sold the naming rights to pay Burrow, can they sell the field name, or can they sell a kidney, or where are they going to come up with the 35? Can it be Paycor Stadium at tdbankloan.com, or the AT&T Trust Field at Paycor Stadium? Where are they going to come up with the money for it?
Maybe they start selling sponsorships on the field. They're redoing the turf this summer. Maybe every yard line is sponsored to maybe gain a little bit of extra revenue. We'll see. There's nothing out of the realm of possibility. But it's funny. We brought it up to the Bengals front office and said, hey, there's a lot of questions about basically cash flow, and are y'all going to be able to put enough into escrow when it's time to come to pay Joe? And they said, that's not something we're going to have an issue with. And I think that they fully understand. If there's one thing that I do think this franchise does understand, it's cash flow and how to make sure that is done accordingly. I think that when you look at the way the CBA works, what is supposed to be paid out, how to maximize the cash flow, not necessarily the cap structure over the years. I think that's something that this front office probably doesn't get enough credit for, but it is going to be a lot of money, and it is going to be a lot of pressure on both of those guys to deliver and really make them worth the investment.
Yeah, and I criticized the Bengals for years for not spending money. I give them credit. They have spent a good amount of money in free agency after never doing that for years. In the last few years, they really have. So I give them credit for that. But it seems crazy that the Bengals would spend $35 million on a wide receiver, but in the end, they have to, because Joe made that commitment. He's going to. My just opinion is he understands if they let Higgins go at the end of next year. He will not understand if they let Chase go. So to me, if they let Chase walk, Joe's going to want out of Cincinnati, I think. What would you think, Ben?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting conversation to be had. I don't know exactly where Joe would fall on that. I do know that they've made it every priority to build around him. What they've done, they've went out and they've given him receivers. They've invested in that offensive line. The structure from the coaching staff is very amenable to how he likes to operate. So I do agree. I think there would be a lot of frustrations if something were to happen with Jamar, but we haven't gotten any indication that that's coming down the line. Yeah. I think the biggest thing is seeing what happens with Justin Jefferson in Minnesota. That's going to set the market from what we're going to see for these other deals with CeeDee Lamb, with Jamar, as we continue to see guys go through it. And Tee Higgins, see what kind of money he'll command as well. So I think that right now the whole franchise is really built up to making sure that Burrow is in the best position available to succeed. When he's been able to be healthy, he's been really good, been one of the best quarterbacks in the league. We see a lot of teams having a lot of conversations about how good their quarterback is. I don't think there's been any questions about that with Burrow. I think the big thing now is how is he going to take care of his body? What lessons did he learn from last year? Stuff that he admitted that he maybe needs to take his foot off the gas as he gets closer to training camp, so his body is fresh and ready to go when the season begins. And as we see, this AFC North is going to continue to be a beating. I'm very curious to see what happens with this moving forward. And, these Bengals, they do need to get back and be competitive because, we talked about them being AFC contenders. Well, now we're getting a little further removed from that Super Bowl run in 21. They've lost in the AFC Championship game in 2022. Burrow had the injury last year. They missed the playoffs. I think this year is going to be huge. And let's put this into perspective as well. The big conversation right now is what's going to happen with this stadium lease, and a lot of the conversations going on about the future of Cincinnati and what this stadium is going to look like. We've seen a lot of comments, heard a lot of comments from both sides, and you can believe that if the Bengals are successful over these next couple of years, it may help the Bengals front office in these negotiations with the taxpayers on what they'd be willing to concede in the future round for the next stadium.
Seems like everybody going there.
Well, Ben, I want to ask you about that. Are the Bengals at all paying attention to what's going on in Cleveland in terms of the stadium? Because in terms of in terms of state funding, right? Like if the state's going to give Cleveland X amount, you better believe Cincinnati's going to be lined up knocking on the door asking, and vice versa.
Yeah, that's on top of everybody's mind. I think, when you're looking at all these deals, especially what happened in Kansas City is something that is really interesting and fascinating. The fact that the Super Bowl champs did not get that funded. Taxpayers there said, that's great that y'all, that we've got a Super Bowl. I've been to Kansas City plenty over the last few years. They take a ton of pride in that franchise, but still, they did not approve that. And you look at what happened. There are funds available from the state to these franchises. That is something that is not lost on that front office. I know that for a fact. And I'll tell you what, Kansas City's situation was brought up in a county meeting just last week when they were talking about the funding. And, Alicia Reese, the president of the Board of County Commissioners, said that, we're expecting $100 million from the NFL. We've seen the Tennessee get this kind of money. Buffalo's getting this kind of money. We expect a nine-digit funding when it comes to this stadium from the NFL. And it's something that everybody is keeping in mind. In fact, Cleveland was brought up in the fact that why were the Browns able to go get SummerSlam out there? Why wasn't that something that was able to be had in Cincinnati? And the liaison between the county and the team essentially said that, the Bengals tried to go get SummerSlam. That wasn't something that the WWE was calling them back on. And so, how deep those negotiations went. But you can believe that all of these situations going on across the league, whether it be Chicago, whether it be Kansas City, whether it be Cleveland, everyone's paying attention because I think that, even internally within the politics structure in Cincinnati, there are a lot of conversations being had. And I think there's an awareness that how much taxpayers are willing to pay for these stadiums, that sentiment is definitely shifting. And I think that's what's going to make this such a fascinating conversation for both NFL cities in the state of Ohio.
Yeah.
Ben, one thing that I love is a good wide receiver versus corner matchup. Obviously, you think of legendary matchups like Deion versus Jerry. Recently, you had Odell versus Josh Norman. When you look at Jamar Chase versus Ward or Newsome, do you think that that's one of the premier matchups in the NFL, as if one of the best ones that we can get on a Sunday?
I want to get a split screen. I think you're right on the money. I want to get a split screen on game day. Give me the TV feed, but give me the Jamar versus Denzel matchup. I want to see that thing play out. When we got L'Jarius Sneed and Jamar going at it, given all the trash talk going on, I want to see those matchups take place because I think it's something a lot of people don't look at. And when you look at how good some of these teams have been, a lot of people talk about Kansas City's offense and how good they were, but their defense won them the championship last year. Like, let's not get it twisted. You go look at how good they've been in the secondary, how good they've been up front. And Jamar had to kind of, he was still defiant as to how good that secondary was or the lack of consistency. But, when they lost to them last year. But you go look at the numbers, you go look at what Snead did, you go look at what Trent McDuffie does, what they do up front. That is a really, really strong defense and what Steve Spagnuolo does with them. And I think that Ward matchup is really good. And this Cleveland team, has given Cincinnati a ton of problems. It's given Burrow a ton of problems. Like we all remember, I believe that Ward pick six from a few years ago. And, I think that is one of the throws that has stuck in their craw over the years. And I love watching that matchup with Denzel and with Jamar, two elite guys. And I think that if you want to win in the NFL, you have to have really elite secondary play as well. You've got to be able to neutralize these receivers. And I think that's something that when you look at that Cleveland defense, it's something that they've done well. I think that's a really good group. And now that they've solidified the middle last offseason, that's a really fun group to watch. And I think if that offense can just get it together, if that quarterback situation can find some consistency, we're talking about Cleveland being in the mix to win that AFC North.
Well, Ben, how big of a difference do you think it makes that, now that Joe Mixon is gone and they got Zach Moss, do you think that is a significant change at the running back position, or do you think they'll still be fine, still be able to do the same things that they've been doing offensively?
Listen, let me tell you, I think that Zach Moss addition is going to make or break this Bengals offense. Like, I know we're going to talk about what's going to happen at slot receiver, what maybe might happen at tight end with Mike Gesicki, but Zach Moss coming in is going to be the X factor for this Bengals offense. And let me tell you why. The Bengals get more light boxes, or as many light boxes as anybody in the league, which means that teams are willing to give up yards on the ground in order to defend against the pass. When you look at how the Bengals line up on the field, even when they had Andy Dalton, before before Joe Burrow got there, they loved 11 personnel with 3 wide receivers, 1 running back, 1 tight end, and they loved to space the field. That being said, you've got to have a running game that can make defenses pay. You've got to be able to take advantage of those light boxes. And when you look at what they've done over the last couple of years, Joe Mixon did not really do that in games. He was not able to get those big yards, those big chunks, those explosive runs. Those were not there. And so I think having Zach Moss in there, he's a guy who's going to be a better schematic fit. That's something that they identified early in free agency as a type of player they want and what Zach does. And he's a guy that should be conducive to that wide zone scheme that Frank Pollock likes to run. With Joe Mixon, even in 2022, you go back, they had to rip up their run game, which is something that's happened multiple times over the years. And they went to a more gap scheme away from that wide zone, and that was able to basically speed it up for Mixon and the running backs, go out, hit the gap, not have to waste time there at the line of scrimmage, be able to hit the line a little quicker. And Zach Moss, he's a guy, he's a one-cut back. He'll like to tell you he's a guy that likes to run off tackle. In fact, last year he led all running backs in yards per attempt off tackle, which is a good number. So I think that this offense actually should be upgraded with Joe Mixon now no longer on the field. I think he's a really good, consistent back. He can get you basically 3 yards when 3 yards are available. But with this offense, with what you want to do in the pass game, you need to get defenses out of that too high shell. You need them to respect the run a little bit more so you can get those big plays to Jamar Chase.
Ben, great stuff, man. We appreciate the time. We'll talk to you again soon.
Yeah, thank y'all for having me.